Welcome to New Writer Podcast, episode 16. This is your weekly update for March 29th, 2015. This is a day late. And that's because I've been pretty busy this week working on Seven Keys 5, trying really hard to make up for lost time. The first 3 months of the year, I was working very slowly. I took a job where I do a lot of writing for work for my day job. And that means when I get home, my writer stamina is pretty much used up. And I've been trying to slowly build that stamina. And I think I'm actually back to where I'm writing as many words a day fiction each night as I was before I started writing for work. So really what that means is my overall words per day has gone up. And I'm just now getting back to where that's pushing my fiction forward. So that's pretty much where I'm at this week. I've written about 13,000 words this week, which is not nearly as much as I would like to write, but it is still a pretty decent amount. Last Sunday, on the 22nd, I ran a Fussy Librarian promotion for Choices, which is free on all of the platforms. And I thought I would give you guys a little update on that, a little insight on how Fussy Librarian worked out for me. For my genre, urban fantasy, Fussy Librarian is an $8 ad, or it was at the time when I ran one. The different prices are based on what genre you're in and the competition. The Fussy Librarian requirements are quite a bit easier to meet than BookBub. You need 10 reviews on Amazon with a 4-star average, or a certain number of reviews across the other platforms with a higher average, or many more reviews with a lower star average. All of the requirements are right there on the website. The price is set based on genre, so some genres cost more. Obviously, that also means some genres probably do better than urban fantasy. Urban fantasy is kind of one of those genres that has a glut of really good books. I don't necessarily want to use the word glut because it has a negative connotation. Urban fantasy has a lot of really good books in it. It's got a lot of competition, and urban fantasy readers read quite a bit, but I don't think they read as much as some other genres. And for the most part, we're also competing for readers with paranormal romance, which again has a lot of really good content. And PR readers only read PR, whereas urban fantasy readers will often read urban fantasy and paranormal romance. So the urban fantasy reader, like a reader who reads only UF, is pretty rare. And so we're competing for a lot of attention there. But I think that overall the promo worked pretty well. On the day the promo ran, I had 146 new downloads on Amazon. I was averaging between 10 to 12 per day before the promo, and since then I'm averaging 15 to 20. So I think overall the 50% increase on average, we'll see how long that lasts. It's been a week, so we'll see how long that stays up there at 15-20%. But I think Fussy Librarian, if you are not able to get into a BookBub and you're kind of in between places where you can apply for a BK Nights ad, which for me performed extremely well in October. I had like 1,500 downloads in October when I ran a BK Nights ad. Fussy Librarian's a good one to slide in there. I've always am looking for new opportunities to try new things, to just get my readers, get my book in front of readers' eyes, and hopefully find a little bit more of an audience. Going perma-free definitely has been a big advantage for me. I've actually added 5 people to my mailing list since doing that, and I know that that's not a huge number. I've been working on a lot of things, like I redesigned my website and my offer and things like that to try to get my mailing list to do better there, to optimize there. But for me right now, I'm like, I just need to focus on continuing to increase my craft and flesh out my offering, build my backlist. I don't feel like I'm growing as fast as some indie authors out there, but I don't feel like I'm stagnant either, and that's really the important part. Like, this is a long-term game, and I'm willing to keep plugging at it for the rest of my life. And hopefully one day that will mean that I can do it full time. If not, then I'll just keep trying. So that's my update in writing and publishing this week. Hopefully I'm going to get caught up. I've got a lot of projects I wanted to work on this year that I keep getting pushed back because of my slow start. And I'm hoping I can continue to build my writer stamina and my momentum, my inertia, to overcome inertia and just get those projects done. I'm behind my schedule that I set for myself, but I don't feel bad. I feel like I'm relearning a lot of my own craftsmanship, and part of that is I've been diving a lot more into books on craft this year also. And that brings me to the second thing I wanted to talk about this week, which was the 2 books that I read this week that I think anyone looking at becoming a writer should pay attention to. And the first one is Techniques of the Selling Writer by Dwight V. Swain. This is a book that is making the rounds in the indie writing circuit. A lot of indie writers I know are reading this book and they are loving it and recommending it to each other. The original version of this book was written, I think, in the 70s. 65, actually. I'm looking at it right now. It was originally published in 1965. So there are some aspects of it that are not craft related, like publishing business and mindset aspects that are pretty out of date. I think the information there is still good, especially if you're thinking about becoming a traditionally published author. If you're looking to pursue a traditional career, that information is probably still green because that's how old the mindset for the traditionally published industry is. And then, of course, there are some cultural things, like some example stories and things that are used that seem historically quaint to us by modern samples. Let's put it that way. Some things that might be offensive to our modern sensibilities, things that we don't think of as acceptable that were the standard at the time. And so I want people to know that going in, that there are some things that might be trigger warnings. But the actual craft writing in the book, as dry and measured as it is really probably as close to a textbook on writing as I've ever read. It is just, it plays out everything you need to know to write a book, to craft a story. And it's all there, and it focuses on the actual structuring and craft of a story versus the grammar and spelling. That stuff is mentioned, but it's more like you should be aware of this, but it's not really important, which I think for me as a writer is definitely true. It's like those things, especially in the modern world, are things that you can outsource. Spelling and grammar, that's what a line editor, that's what a proofreader is for. But they're not the things that are going to make or break your story. And you should strive to be better on those, but the craftsmanship of actually putting a story together correctly is the more important part, and that's what the book focuses on. For the most part, it is probably like just as basic. It's a textbook. It's not it doesn't have a lot of personality. It doesn't have a lot of jokes or flow or anything like a lot of modern writing books do. It is just good, clean information that you should know, that you should be aware of. And I suggest anyone who is looking to pursue a career in writing, check that book out. And again, it is Techniques of the Selling Writer by Dwight V. Swain, and I will link to it in the show notes with an affiliate link so that you can, get a hold of the book and I can buy some hot dogs or something. The second book I read this week is actually a book by former podcast guest Michael Laron. It is Indie Poet Rockstar is the name of the book. And if you are a poet, and I'm clearly not, I'm not very talented when it comes to poetry, but if you are a poet and you are wanting to find a way, if you're trying to make poetry your career, you have to read this book. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is required reading for anyone who wants to be a professional poet. Michael actually is the person who brought me back to reading poetry and watching a lot of awesome slam poets on YouTube, and he really rekindled my understanding of poetry in a way that I hadn't been able to realize I was missing for years. And when I talked to him back in September, he turned me on to a lot of really cool, awesome new poets. And this book is his extension on that. Now, if you are a poet and you want to pursue poetry, Michael's blog at michaelleron.com is definitely something you should be reading on a regular basis. He has an awesome series of blog posts for the 21st century poet, and this book is like the omnibus, the collective power of those blog posts distilled and refined and made even more potent. And even as though I will probably never release a book of poetry, there are things in this book that for me as a fiction writer were just awesome things to learn. It talks a little bit about marketing and creativity and ideas and those things that just were good ideas for anyone who is writing or creating music or creating Udemy courses or any of those things. Like if you're creating for a living, there is information in Indie Poet Rockstar that is going to benefit you, and I think you really should check it out. But if you are going to be a poet specifically, you have to read this book. You can't, I don't feel like there is a resource out there that will give you the same level of information as there is in Indie Poet Rockstar for poetry specifically. I did a little digging and I can't find anything. I think Michael even talks about the reason he wrote the book and the blog posts in the first place is because he was trying to find the information and couldn't. And it's good information that you need to know. I have a friend who writes poetry on the internet, on Tumblr, and I am looking at him right now in the camera in my mind's eye and saying, you need to read this book because this book will help you understand how to take that passion for something that you love doing and maybe make a little money off of it. And that brings me to one final point for the week, and it's making money as a writer. And lately we've been hearing a lot of buzz in the blogosphere about people don't make money as a writer. And this has always been true. You know, for every Stephen King, there's a million people out there whose book never pays out their royalties. And it's always been part of the writer's ecosystem that some writers become very successful and most writers struggle. I remember when I was in high school, a friend of mine and I used to joke that his goal in life was to become, a down on his luck writer living in a crappy roach-filled apartment with his only furniture being a stained mattress and his only friend a bottle of vodka. And that was like, for us, that was what a writer was. We understood that then, that most people who wrote books never made a living. But here's the thing, is now you can make a living. It is possible now, where it wasn't necessarily even possible 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And you can do it on your own terms, in your own way. That's why I advocate self-publishing. It's not because it is the silver bullet, the get-rich-quick scheme, but it's because you get to take something you enjoy doing, and if you apply yourself, you will eventually make it. Now, I'm only making $25 to $30 a month. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm not a millionaire by any means, and I'm not, by most definitions of successful. But I am moving forward with my career. I can see it growing. You know, a year ago, I published my first book in March of 2013. Well, I published the first book I wrote by myself in March of 2013. Alcohologist Chronicles had already been out for about a month then, but no one reads that. So I made almost $260 in my first year of writing, which to me is $260 that I would never have made had I not pursued the creative, the indie aspects, if I had not gone ahead and done that. And people will tell you that you should hold back, that you should wait until everything's perfect and good, and that until you can afford professional covers and professional editing and all that stuff. And that's probably great advice. That's probably good advice from a long-term standpoint of someone who wants to sell their one book really well. But one thing I learned from blogging, and one thing that I hope translates into writing, and this is how I pursue my business of writing, is the connection between a writer and their readers is more emotional than that. It's more founded in being true to the feelings and that bond that you earn, and you don't need to be as polished to earn that bond. In fact, in some ways, spending too much time on that stuff, like, it fogs over that emotional building. So, whereas, yes, I think that the advice of get a professional cover, get edits, all that stuff, that's good advice, and it makes sense, and it's important, and you should do that if you can. I don't think the advice of hide your work because it's not good enough and not ready for the public is good advice. I think you need to be aware of what you need. You need to think it's ready. You need to think it's good enough, and not let fear hold you back. Because you know what? If you're indie published, you can put a new cover on it down the line. You can update the manuscript. You can upload a new version of the book. You can correct those mistakes. You can polish. You can grow. And honestly, I am a huge fan of a lot of series books. I've read a lot of books in series for a long time. And I can tell you that if you read the first book in a series and you read the most recent book in a series, you can see how much the author has grown, and you feel as a reader as you go through the series that you're growing with them. So, for example, I don't necessarily feel like Choices is... When I wrote Choices, when I published Choices, I felt very strongly that it was worth putting out there, that it was ready to go. And now, a year later, looking back on it, I go, I could do better. And I do. I feel like there's a significant growth for me between each of my books. But if I hadn't put that book out, if I hadn't done that in the first place, I don't think I would have written the other books. I don't think I would have grown. I don't think I would have spent that time doing that. And I feel like there is too much time spent in the author community, especially the indie author community, putting other people down, telling other people their work isn't good enough, or comparing yourself to other people and telling yourself your work's not good enough because it's not as good as theirs. And that's incredibly dangerous for us as a culture. Not just a writer's culture, but for us as a global human culture, to say that one thing isn't as good as another thing, or that art needs to be refined and distilled. That's a rant for a completely different time, probably another place. But I just felt like that was something that needed to be said. I want you to know, listener, watcher, viewer, reader, don't let other people's expectations stop you from pursuing your goals. Don't let someone tell you you're not good enough, because you are. And even if you feel like you're not, if you feel like your work needs to go away, maybe it does. Maybe that story is too close to home and too personal and you don't want to share it. That is a different situation than having someone else tell you your story sucks. And you might open yourself up to a lot of hate when you put something out there. But I'm here to tell you that no matter how polished and clean and perfect it is, you are opening yourself up to a lot of hate, because there are people out there who can't handle raw emotion, who can't handle your message, who can only hate. It's their only thing, they're their only coping mechanism. And you have to ignore those people, because they don't deserve to be part of your world. Do your best to make everything as good as you can. If you can afford a cover artist, get a cover artist. If you can afford to spend the time writing 30 drafts to get it to where you feel comfortable releasing it, then do that. But don't do it because someone else is telling you that you have to succeed. Do it because you want to give your art that time. Don't do it because someone's telling you you're not good enough. Do it because you want to be better. That's the only reason you should do anything. Okay, so that was my weekly update. Thank you for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed this. If you have, I would love to hear from you. A review on iTunes would be great. Drop me a comment on YouTube or on the podcast, on the blog at newwriterpodcast.com. Send me an email, contact@newwriterpodcast.com. I've been your host, Matt Brotherton. Thank you for watching.